So it's the 1st of April, the sun is out, the birds are singing, and I thought I'd have a little look around and a chat about some shade loving plants in a tropical style garden. Welcome to my channel, let's get on with it. Pretty much the whole right side of my garden is shade loving plants with a certain amount of sun coming in the late evening. Now, what casts that shade? The ferns, the palms, the fence. And a good little tip is, if you can see fencing behind, maybe paint it dark, because relatively most shade loving plants are dark green or have big green leaves. So the black background or the dark brown background, whatever it may be, will be a great canvas to show them sort of big green leaves off. So maybe think about that before you plant up, and then you can move on to what plants suit that border best. I think I'm going to use this border as my reference point to the different layers of how to maybe plant shade. By no means am I saying this is perfect, but it's there to give you an idea. So our shade is cast by the Trachycarpus palms above, there's a red robin there and a few other plants. Then we have a cabin to the left and a fence that's painted black at the back to give us a bit of a canvas. So once you know that the height is there and that is what is casting the shade, whether that be the trees or the fence, it's then thinking about the right plants to sort of build that layering down. Now that is going to be determined by the size of your border. This border there probably goes from about 1.5 meters working its way out to maybe 2.5 meters plus. So that gives me a bit of depth where I can bring the plants down to the lower level. So we know we've got an upper canopy because that's casting the shade. So let's think about the plants that may be ideal for that mid-level evergreen all year round backbone structure. Fatseers is probably the most obvious one, and if you go more for that jungle look, you want to probably go more for the dark green leaves maybe than the less colourful ones, even though they will fit into that scenario. But for instance, the Fatseer polycarpers definitely give that interest that you're looking for, but if you're trying to brighten that spot up, then you might want to go for more a variegated one with some white to it, or even the what I call Fatseer Annalise, because that's what I originally brought it as, but is now sold as Fatseer Camouflage. Really nice leaves on that to sort of bring a little bit of colour and interest to that shady border. Then you've also got the other Fatseer polycarpa standard form, which is a bit harder to get but definitely gives a bit of interest. And if you're really lucky, you might be able to source something like the mega Fatseer or something like that, which can give a bit more interest than the standard Fatseer, which I truly love as well. So by no means am I knocking that. Be aware that some of these Fatseers, especially the standard one, can grow. I have it here up to probably 9 foot tall, so be aware of that. They can be pruned back, so that's no issue. Also, Fatseers are sort of susceptible to the new growth on them getting frosted, so there's not a lot you can do about that. Maybe put a bit of fleece over it, but generally they can get frosted off if you get late frosts in sort of April to May. And also something I do is you have to watch that they don't get attacked by aphids and bugs, because that can really sort of, on the new growth, affect the leaves and make them look a bit distorted. I like to sort of spray them down if they look like they're getting aphids or bugs on them, with just a strong hose and wash anything off. So Fatsy is most definitely my #1 option. Akuba japonica, really tough plant. It is a bit of a love-hate plant. Some people love it, some people hate it, especially these more variegated ones where they really don't appeal to a lot of people, but they are a tough plant and really fit into a tropical style border that don't need any work really at all. But now there is a lot more variety out there, so we can go for the Akuba Razani, which is a dark green Akuba that looks really good in a shady border, because it's just got that dark green glossy leaves about it. And then this is another one of the Akubas that I've just bought recently. I think it looks absolutely brilliant. And this is Akuba gracifolia, and it's sort of like Rosanite, and as in it's just plain green, but these jagged edges give it a little bit of menace about it, and I really like that. And this one come from Jersey Cottage Nursery in South Lincolnshire area. Really love it. There's quite a few of us now you can source, because there seems to be more sort of nurseries out there looking for them more rarer types, so well worth a look. Omiana is one that's plain green, has a different sort of leaf shape as well. There's a few of the different variegated types, well worth looking for. But I would definitely say the Akubas, for most mid-level shade loving shrubs, is one that's got to be in there. Mahonias, really good at taking sun or shade, but they do really good for me in that sort of dappled shade conditions. This one is Mahonia Soft Caress, always been hardy for me. They say it's hardy to about -12. Really good plant, grows to about maybe 1.5 meters. This lovely evergreen fern type foliage looks absolutely brilliant in a shady border. And then there's also, which is talked about quite a lot recently, is sort of quite a desired plant, is a very similar one, which is Mahonia Sweet Winter, which actually probably has slightly thicker, more architectural leaves than the Soft Caress. Both of them really good for that mid-level shade loving border. Nandinas, they can take full sun but also do well in shadier conditions. I have a few planted in dappled shade, or actually quite dark shade, and they seem to do all right. So they get these red berries after winter, and now it's obviously a early spring. New growth coming through will be bright red, and they just have these small delicate leaves. And there's a few different varieties now that you can get, and like I say, these can be grown in sun as well as shade. And I also like the Nandina Bright Light, which its new growth, instead of coming out bright red, comes out almost like a lime green. And then you also have the variegated ones. I think it's called, if I remember rightly, might be Nandina Twilight or something like that, which also does really well in these sort of semi-shade conditions and adds that pop of colour. So they're some of the main shrub type plants that I would use to combine in an evergreen border. I'm also going to mention Scheffleras, even though these can grow into small trees over time, so be aware of that. But it can also be grown as like a mid-level shrub. But this one, shiflera taiwaniana, absolutely gorgeous leaves. Pretty hardy in most of the UK. You do need free draining soil pretty much for most shifleras. They don't like to sit too waterlogged, so if you've got them conditions, absolutely ideal. But for me, shiflera taiwaniana definitely should be somewhere in your garden as a shade border. Don't plant out too early. They want to be planted out a bit bigger with a woody stem where they'll be a lot sort of tougher, and hopefully should do really well for you. I know some people have had some in the past that can be a little bit tricky or finicky, but I think the key is to plant them a little bit bigger and make sure that that soil is free draining and they don't sit waterlogged. Like I say, behind it, this one is my shiflera rhododendrofolia, also really hardy for me. I also have shiflera delavi in the garden, which has been hardy for me as well. So they're harder to get, but for that, sometimes you need them odd, unusual plants just to give it a little bit more character to the border that you don't see from all the other standard, more looking plants. Then we work our way down to the ground cover plants. Now, if we're talking all year round evergreen plants, there's lots of evergreen ferns we can use. We can use grasses, there's euphorbias, all that can take these shady conditions. But what I've done is I've got a few plants out on the lawn, and hopefully that will like sort of show a little bit more the look that I'd be trying to gain. So I've put a few hardy evergreen ground cover plants down here as a bit of a display on my lawn to try and give you an idea of how they may work. And what I would sort of say is, depending on the style you're going for, so if you're going for more of a tropical look, you might want these brighter colours. So there we have a lime green heuchera next to a black mundo grass Ophiopogon, and them more colourful plants will give you more of a tropical feel. If you're going for more of a jungle feel, then you probably want to go for more of a dark green leaf shape, maybe, let's say. And I would definitely say group planting. So here, for instance, that is 5 different Dryopteris ferns. If you put one in, unless it's a really architectural type plant, it may not give you the effect that you look. It could look like one plant, one plant, one plant, one plant, and not really flow. So sometimes you have to, and I know plants aren't cheap, but sometimes you have to, if you want the effect, you have to plant a few of them in groups, and the general consensus is you usually plant in odd numbers because it becomes always meant to feel a bit more natural. So, and trying to keep the contrast different. So for instance there, the shiflera has palm type leaves. Then you've got on the ferns, you've got that piñate fern type leaf, and then we've got a more rounded plain green leaf shape on the Acuba gracifolia. Then what we've done is, this is Carex Irish green, which has got that long strappy leaf shape. And what I've tried to do there is I've tried to keep the ferns a little bit separate from the Mahonia sweetwinter, because they both have that fern type shape. I'm not saying they wouldn't work together, but in this scenario I'm trying to separate them a little bit. And then at the bottom here we have this Pachysandra, which is a great ground covering plant, hardy and evergreen in my location, and these are going into my garden very soon. And then we have the Fatseas. This is Fatsia spiderweb, and a Nandina at the back. And then I've just put a potted palm and a cord line at the back to give you the idea of where the height's coming from if this was an actual border. So the point I'm trying to make from this is not how you should necessarily do it, but to think about the different leaf shapes and the different colours for the style of garden that you want, whether that be jungle or whether that be more tropical style. Because if I took these grasses, these black grasses and these heucheras out of that border, then that whole border looks completely different. Because then if I move the camera forward, it's just all about the greens, so then that looks so much more jungly. So the types of shade loving plants that you put in will change the effect that you're going for, and that is the whole point of this little display here, to try and show you how the different colors and the different contrasts can give you a different effect for the same border. So this video's got way longer than I ever thought it should be, so I'm going to leave it at that. Any questions, please leave it in the comments. This is my style of gardening and these are my opinions. It may not be the same as everyone else's there, but I thought I'd put it out there anyway. Thank you very much for watching. See you next time.